Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Table with Tom and Eric, a show about the people who play board games. I'm Tom Vassell.
Hi there, I'm Eric Summerer, and our guest at the table today is the owner of Smirk and Dagger and Smirk and Laughter Games, as well as the designer of Cutthroat Caverns, Nevermore, Tower of Madness, and more. He's also a resident of the coolest state in board gaming. Please welcome Curt Covert. Hello, Curt.
Hey, I want to be clear, nobody says that.
Coolest state in board games.
Nobody in existence says that.
Lots of cool people here in Connecticut.
I didn't argue that. But Connecticut, by very nature, cannot be the coolest state in gaming, considering the small amount of people who live there, and also your exits are on the wrong side of the highway.
I am an unreliable narrator.
Yeah, you are. Well, welcome, Curt. It's good to have you here.
Yeah.
Curt and me just lost a game together not too long ago.
Really? What'd you play?
The cube game. What's that called? I should remember what it's called. It's not the cube.
Tesseract. Yeah,
Tesseract. Yeah, he taught it to us, and we failed woefully.
It is a tough
I
one.
believe I have also failed woefully at Tesseract with Curt teaching, so I think it's the teacher that's the problem.
Well, could be.
It could be. Tom was joking that he thinks that your wonderful last name is made up. Is this actually, Curt, your real last name?
This would not be the first time that I have been so accused. But yes, it is in fact my actual name.
I'm going to go to my deathbed not believing you.
Yeah.
I feel like you've changed it. That's fine. We'll accept this false narrative.
We think it might have come from English, where it was probably like where I was located. Like our family was, John over at the Coverts, which are foxholes.
Okay.
That's so mundane, though.
No, you need a better story.
Okay.
You come from a family of spies.
It's true.
Who are not very good spies because, they
of course announced it, yeah.
Yeah, but maybe
right,
people think
Tom,
they wouldn't be that obvious. It's so obvious that it can't be true.
Ah.
So, Curt, with your family of spies, where did you grow up, and where are you right now? Other than we know you're in Connecticut.
Yes.
Have you always been a Connecticut guy?
No. So my family, my dad was with IBM, so every 2 years we were in a different place, and but all over the eastern, kind of East Coast. So New York, Connecticut, Maryland, New Jersey, like you just kind of all over the place there. Went to school then in Syracuse, New York, and spent some time out in California, and finally came back to this area where I've been living in Connecticut, just outside of Danbury, Connecticut, for the past, close to 20 years, I guess. Yeah.
So when you say Syracuse, are you an Orange person?
I am he.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm a Newhouse grad. How do we not know that?
I am also a Newhouse grad.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so we're going to talk about television.
I don't
radio,
understand
film.
anything about that last few sentences.
I was a film school guy. I went to California to work out in the film business, and did so for a while, and decided I hated it, and headed back out.
Okay. What did you do in the film industry?
I tried the beginning jobs of lots of different roles. So I was assistant costume, I was assistant editor, I was assistant like anything, and just decided that it really wasn't for me. So I even did storyboarding on a couple films. There was one with Meredith Baxter Birney, made-for-TV movie where I did a whole stunt scene, storyboarded it for the director and the stunt crew. So.
Wait, is your name in credits of a movie, like at the very end?
Oh, you can find my name in many. I have an IMDb page. So.
Do you pause it? Do you make your kids watch the credits, and then pause it at that point and be like, "There I am"? Because I would.
No, I do not.
I did when I showed up in the credits of something, and I was like, "Yeah, all right, everybody, gather around. This is the moment." It's not very exciting.
You can actually see me walking away from the gravesite in Phantasm 2 because they needed an extra. I have a very distinctive gait, and you can just tell it's me.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Eric, you didn't tell me this is going to be like super famous people talk now. I am not prepared for this.
This was a surprise to me as well. This is the sense of discovery we get here on this program.
So how far back do you and Steven Spielberg go?
Yeah.
Oh,
also, I was the very first art librarian at Hanna-Barbera Studio, home of Yogi and Flintstones and Johnny Quest.
So you were like filing old animation cells and cataloging stuff?
I created the library system because it was just art stuffed in drawers for years. And they brought me on to do that. And in so doing, I created a digital tool that I didn't understand what I'd created. I made something for me, but I created one of the very first keyword search visual databases. So that when Turner Broadcasting was trying to archive news footage, they flew me out to this huge symposium with a bunch of very smart companies who knew what the forefront was. I was basically doing Google before Google. And I still, even after that meeting, I didn't really see the big picture. I had just created a tool that was handy for me. So.
Wow. So what made you throw it all away and go into board gaming?
Yeah, this seems like a bad career move.
Well, so you're right about that. And it wasn't a direct step. I ended up, when I was at Hanna-Barbera, getting really excited about graphic art. So I became a graphic artist and then turned that into a career I was a creative director at a marketing agency for like 20 years. And concurrent with that is when I launched Smirk and Dagger. So I did that from like 9 to midnight with my very robust and demanding marketing job.
All right. How far back did gaming enter your life? What's the earliest gaming memory that you've got?
Oh man. I mean, well, I've always gamed. I mean, the kind of pivotal moment that really got me excited about stuff, though, because playing with my sister, the various Hasbro games, that's fine. But my uncle was big into chess. And we would go to family gatherings, and he would challenge me mercilessly to chess. And he would decimate me just, time after time and force me to get really much better. And so finally I started at some point winning. And I think the first game I won, he's like, okay, that's it. We're done now.
My work here is complete.
Yep.
I will go to my deathbed still not understanding the point of that. For every story of like yours where you're like, I got better, so I beat him, there's dozens of kids who quit.
True.
I don't understand the whole like destroy children so that they can learn life lessons. We don't do this in anything else. I don't go out and like, hey kids, we're going to play football. And as soon as I get the ball, I tackle them
right
to the ground and be like, oh, you're never going to get anywhere. Maybe when you're bigger. It just seems odd to me.
I mean, with chess, you can help guide them, but in the end, you're kind of on your own. So, and honestly, I really developed a great strategic skill set, going through that process. So
I would argue you're going through that despite that process, though. Like that was like, I don't know. I don't like it.
Have you heard that chess is currently going through a major resurgence? The popularity on sites like chess.com is surging right now.
Probably from Queen's Gambit, no doubt.
That's what a lot of people think, but I think even the folks that run it are like, we don't really know what's going on. But tons of kids are really into chess right now. My son is playing it on the app. My youngest actually knows it as well. Why do you think it appeals to kids so much?
I think it appeals to anyone who tries to pick it up. I mean, chess remains one of the absolute great games. It's always going to be in my top 10, even though it's not, like cool to say, oh, that's one of my favorite games. But I mean, it really is. It's a brilliant game, and I
not if you say it like that. But have you ever played Nightmare Chess from Steve Jackson?
Absolutely have, and it's fun as a lark. Right? I enjoy it for what it is, but it's not really quite chess.
So we have a copy of chess in the Dice Tower library. It's called The World's Greatest Chess Set, which is not quite true. But I stuck Nightmare Chess in just to mess with people when they pull it out.
Yeah.
But I agree. It's a silly lark, but it's. I just figured, knowing the kind of games you make, that it would be something you would enjoy.
Oh, I absolutely do enjoy it, and I like to play it. I mean, it's just very casual and fun. But I'm not gonna scratch my chin and really puzzle over my moves. It's more of a reflexive game at that point.
Yeah.
So you decide to go into business making games, Smirk and Dagger part-time. I think if I can think of two hallmarks of the games during that period, it would be Take That games
Absolutely.
and parodies of board games. You don't see a lot of parodies of board games out there, but there were, am I correct, two in your catalog? What made you go in that direction? This is Run for Your Life Candyman.
Yep.
And Shooting Ladders.
Correct.
Wait, before we go any farther, Eric, have you played either of these games?
I have played. So we played Run for Your Life Candyman, and we made cookies to play with it. So we made gingerbread men, and then we used icing to X off the damage on the different limbs, and then broke off legs and arms to eat them. So yes, I have played.
That is a family tradition in a lot of homes, and people send me their photos every year.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So why don't we see more parodies of board games out there?
I mean, well, first of all, let's start with the original question. Why did I do it?
Yeah, why'd you do it?
It was a joke. I was never intending to publish that game. I had just finished Hex. We had just come out with Dead Last, the Chaos Poker game, and I was thinking about what kind of new things we could be doing, and I just thought it was a funny thought, a funny idea that you could turn Candyland upside down, the sweetest introduction to gaming that anyone in the U.S. has ever had, and just turn it upside down and make it just nasty, where you're ripping off cookie limbs trying to escape the land. So it tickled me, and I brought it a black and white version of it, just hand created. I brought it to the Gamma trade show, and I just I was going to show a couple retailers, and everyone who stopped by stopped dead in their tracks. It's like, oh my God, what have you done? Nope. Full color, put any price you want on it. I don't care. We're going to sell the crap out of it. And so I was like, well, okay. I mean, I was just going to put it on my website as a free download you could play with regular Candyland, because, I think as famously Tom may have said, it's fun, but it's not really much of a game. It's just it's just ridiculous. And it is. But it did sell like crazy, and it remains the biggest event we hold at Gen Con every single year, with 100 people screaming their heads off, ripping the limbs off of cookies. It's insane. We have been almost thrown out of Gen Con convention halls at midnight several times because of how loud it gets.
Wow. Do you play with cookies at Gen Con?
We absolutely do. We play with cookies and frosting. And there have been rituals that have been built into it where if you lose your head during play, which of course happens quite a bit, the tradition now is to basically stand up at the table, hold the little torn head in your hands, and say, "Behold, the head of my enemy!" In which case, the entire 100 people do the whole thing from I forget what movie it was, but just Haru! It's just it's insane.
When is this at Gen Con? Because I might make room in my schedule.
It is almost always Saturday at midnight. And it is insane. People, screaming up the top of them 2 cookies enter, 1 cookie leaves. Okay.
I don't even know where to go with this. Yes.
Well, I'll tell you this. So, Eric, you said he made 2 parody games, but I think he's made 4. Because you made Run for Your Life Candyman. You made the Shooting Ladders. And you made Roll for Your Life Candyman. But I would argue that Tower of Madness is a parody game.
Oh, interesting.
That sounds like it was a game that started out as a joke.
It kind of did. I got really but there it was a little bit different. I got inspired by Dread, the role-playing game.
Right.
Which, uses the Jenga tower as a way to heighten tension and as a skill check. I thought that was brilliant to bring in like this childhood game to create tension in a board game. So I was like, well, what other games are out there that could potentially do that? And that's when I thought of Kerplunk. And then for a while, the working title had been Cthulhu, because
Ooh,
I thought,
I like that.
I like it too, but I didn't want to get in any legal trouble.
Oh man.
Yeah. Now
I would have stood up for you.
Yeah. Meanwhile,
that matters.
The Roll for Your Life Candyman. Obviously, I was originally a little bit concerned about that too, but Mike Hurdle, who was the chief development guy at Hasbro, we became friends over the years. And at one point, he walked by my booth at Gen Con when we were launching it, and he like stopped and he looked over. He's like, "Oh my Kurt, what have you done?" I was like, "Well, we're just having some fun." He's like, "Oh," I was like, "Do you mind if I take a copy of this game back to the design team over at Hasbro?" And I'm like, "Well, listen, so long as it doesn't go to legal, I am fine with it." He gives it a long, like, "You're fine," But that same year, he had to stop the Redneck Life folks. Lisa he had to talk to them because their original title was The Game of Redneck Life.
Ah, yes.
And that was a trademark infringement. So they had to. So they made nice and they just changed the title just a little bit and it was fine. But
I gotta say, I would never understand all the different things involved with trademarks and such. But
right, it's picking up the specific language. So it's Run for Your Life Candyman doesn't say Candyland.
Right.
But
Candyman sounds very similar.
Sure, but and the inference everyone will get, but that's the thing. A parody, to be a parody, has to actually make fun of the thing that it is spoofing. I couldn't have called it a parody if in the end I was making fun of hamburgers, right?
Yeah.
It has to actually be a comment on the sweetest game in the world in order to qualify.
All right.
All right. So what would you say is the bigger hit, Run for Your Life Candyman or Cutthroat Caverns?
Oh, Cutthroat Caverns. No question.
Well, that's a pathetic transition there, but all right, we'll run with it.
All right, fine. Let's come up with a different transition. So
Cutthroat Caverns, hey?
So how many expansions has Cutthroat Caverns gone through over the years?
Total of 5 and 1 adventure book.
Okay.
That's right. I remember the adventure book.
Yeah.
I don't think I had a chance to play that one. So for those who are new to it, Cutthroat Caverns, semi-cooperative game.
Yep.
You're delving into a dungeon. I was explaining this to my neighbor. I was like, I'm interviewing Curt Covert today, and explaining the game. You are delving into the dungeon. You are all working to defeat whoever is in front of you, but only the person who lands the killing blow gets credit for doing so.
Right.
And so it's all about pushing people out of the way, getting in the way of their attacks, you taking an extra attack, etc., to make sure you're the one that gets the final go. But if you all stand back and do nothing, you're all going to lose.
Right.
What inspired you to do this semi-cooperative attack approach? And two, why does this game tend to work when other semi-cooperative games tend to flounder?
Two great questions. So the first one is that when I was in high school in the 80s, now I had a very unusual role-playing group. We played D&D, and it was me and 6 women. And back in the 80s, that was kind of unheard of. I wasn't even the DM. I was a player. And as you might imagine, it was really story driven. It was about relationships. It was, Tolkien-esque. Like if you found a magic item, by God, it went to the person who could wield it best. So contrast that. I went to college, and the guys on the floor wanted to play D&D. I'm like, cool, that'd be great. And the dungeon master decided to let evil alignments in the game. Well, all of a sudden, I found myself playing with this like horror-struck sense. Like, I was not afraid of the DM. I was terrified what the people next to me were going to do. And that feeling of shock, disgust, and fear, I was like, how can I capture that and let that live throughout a board game where you need their help, but you cannot trust any of them? That was the impetus.
All right.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly in the times I've played, the moments are, you get all sorts of great moments. There's a lot of, oh, why did you do that? Standing up and almost wanting to flip the table.
Yeah.
Because you've set up some amazing move, and then somebody slips in and just a little dagger to the back, and they take the points after all that setup work that you've done.
Yeah, and quite honestly, the game is really a series of honey traps. It is a wonderful social experiment. You know you have to work together. If you don't, you're all going to die. But at some point, you have to say, well, this is my opportunity to be selfish. When am I going to do it? How am I going to do it? How hard is it going to hurt someone else? And I find it fascinating to play with people to see where that breaking point is. But broadly, the reason that I take that game so much was because I love an emotional curve on games. I love to see people react, get into the game and its theme, so the pieces just disappear, and you're just left with the experience. So when you get up and after playing Cutthroat Caverns or most of my games, people are not saying, oh, if I had optimized my points just a little bit, but no one says that. They're talking about the world of the game and what you did to me or what I was able to achieve. Like, that to me is memorable, and it's tied to the act of playing and our time together as a group. And the fact that Cutthroat Caverns can so interestingly create behavioral funnels that predictably act on people in a way that gets them to find those tipping points in themselves, I just think it's fascinating.
So you talk about the players getting into the story of it, and one of the criticisms that comes in on semi-co-op games is that if some player decides that if I can't win, no one wins.
Sure.
And they decide to start just tanking the whole thing because that's better than me losing is everyone losing. Do you think that there's something about that getting involved in the story that keeps that from happening, or do you see that with players in groups as well? Or is there something in the game that prevents one player from just tanking everything?
So it really depends on the game. First of all, there are a lot of games that have backstabbing mechanics that are not themselves backstabbing games, and they are misplaced. Most people hate backstabbing mechanics because the point of the game is not backstabbing. When it is, it's a social contract, and everyone's like, okay, cool, I can do this, but I know you're going to come back and do it. So the hard feelings are mitigated by the fact that it's not coming out of left field. If a backstabbing moment comes during a game where no one expects it, that's where it can ruin games. And it's, I think, for people who have played something like Cutthroat Caverns, or even Nevermore, you see it coming. You're all building towards it. It's the point of the game, and therefore it's hard to really get too upset about anything because you were going to do it if they didn't. So
yeah. Yep. I see. You know it going in. It's that whole magic circle concept where from the very beginning there's going to be backstabbing.
Yeah. And if it's not your cup of tea, not to sit down.
Now, one thing I was curious about, I don't mean to get too far off of the semi-co-op part here, but this game has kind of a weird overlap, and I've always been surprised that it hasn't caused people more problems, because the game is this backstabbing, silly fest in a sense. Even the card names are like that. They're like, like you poke the monster with a stick so that it hits the next guy in the face.
Not on my watch. Yeah.
Right. And that silliness is there, But then when you look at the art and the backgrounds of the monsters,
Yes.
some of these could make Cthulhu run away in fear.
That was important, and I'll tell you why. Um, if you didn't feel a sense of dread, if that monster doesn't flip over and you're like, oh man, we got to pull ourselves together and start working together, right? That is the fear that keeps the co-op portion working. And
Okay.
the humor often comes from what I'm willing to do in order to best someone. But what pulls us together is this collective feeling like if we don't work together, we're not getting out of here.
So you need real fear, but silly antics around that fear.
Yeah.
Well, this comes to the title of your company, Smirk and Dagger, right? There's sure. Well, the reason I ask this is because it's a fine line to walk. Like, what do you think of all your games would be your most serious game?
Before the Smirk and Laughter titles?
Yeah, I don't mean in the sense of you're going to say the spill. But I mean like a game that there's not really. Yeah, like from the Smirk and Dagger. Like if I was saying, well, I don't really want to be joking around. This is like a serious game. Do you have one, or do they all have that element of tongue in cheek to them?
Probably. I think all of them have to have just a little bit of levity because, again, the backstabbing is not mean-spirited. The backstabbing really is, it's part of the fun. And if it doesn't come with a smirk, like if there's not an enjoyment on both sides of it, even if you're cursing someone's name, like there's, and then vowing to get back at them, those are our feelings that at the game table we can accept, and it's the social contract. But yeah, it comes with a bit of a wink. So I think a little bit of levity is important.
Did you have any titles that ended up with that were skewing away from the smirk? That this is ending up a little too mean, and we have to add a little bit more levity to it to make it work.
No, because I think that's the center of where it started.
Okay.
That's what the experience was intended to be.
Well, then you can tell us how Smirk and Laughter started and what caused you to change to doing that, or also doing that, I guess.
Sure. Well, Smirk and Laughter came about because at some point I was like, well, I've been doing this for a long time, but I'm doing it as a hobby business. At one point, I might want to pivot and do it full time. But to do that, backstabby games, it was a great way to plant a flag when I started and say, I stand for something. Because at first, I looked at other people's, websites and their mission statements, and, we make great games for everybody is not really a mission statement. I wanted to, stand for something in the industry. And, so people could come to my games and know what they were getting into every time. Great. So that's marketing. But it's niche, right? I knew that I was building into a niche audience. I served that audience well. But if I was going to go full time, I needed to broaden. And so as I started thinking about that, one of the games I had come out with, I think in 2014, was a game called Sutaku, which was a push-your-luck pub-style dice game. And because it was push-your-luck, you could screw yourself while you played. And I said, well, that's adjacent. I can make a rationale for that. I brought it to the Gamut Trade Show, and every retailer who stopped by my booth said, wait a second. Where's the dagger in this Smirk and Dagger game? I'm like, oh man, I've really done a good job on branding.
Yeah.
So I realized if I was going to step outside of that zone, I was going to have to make some kind of announcement that people would say, oh, this is a different style. So Smirk and Laughter was created so that I could step outside of backstabbing and at least let people know it was coming. Because setting expectation for what you're about to sit down to is critical during any game.
Excellent. And did you have trouble, getting that across? Was the name change enough, or were people just expecting? They saw the smirk, and they were ready for backstabbing, no matter what it said underneath it.
I think the very first time I said I was doing something like a cooperative game, right? There were a lot of shocked faces. And so there was an education, but I think most people picked it up very quickly and understood, and then could say, okay, putting that aside, I can now enjoy this for what it is. And quite honestly, that distinction is going to be going away this year. This is our 20th year. I've been doing Smirk and Laughter now for 6 of those years, and I no longer get the shocked faces. So at this point, it's time to collapse back down into a single brand.
Okay.
Which, I think while Smirk and Laughter had a purpose, it also creates a little confusion in the marketplace, and it's outlived its usefulness, I think, at this point. So, but the types of titles that we've now been able to do as a result they're very different. They have much broader shoulders. They appeal to a much wider audience, and it has really helped in the growth of the company.
So everything
let's talk
will fall
about that.
under everything
Dagger.
will fall under Smirk and Dagger from here on out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was just looking at this. On Board Game Geek, they're actually under 2 different
Yes.
headers. But you were talking about popular games. So a couple years ago, or I guess it's 4 years ago now, when Shobu came out, you had a little bit of a hit on your hand with this very unassuming looking abstract strategy game.
Yeah.
That got pretty good reviews. I don't know how well it did for you, but
It did great.
Well, that's great to hear. But I would bet that this year's Boop, from all my accounts of talking to retailers and people, this has come out of not nowhere. Would be too strong of a word, but definitely I would talk to some retailers and say, so what games are doing really well? And all of them said Boop.
Yeah, it's fun. It's created a phenomenon. And weirdly, those same retailers, when they spoke to me, the games basically sold through in 2 weeks. And I had done the biggest print run I have ever done on an initial release of anything. I did 12,000 units. Now, only about 2,000 actually went to something like Barnes & Noble. So all of the rest of the 10,000 moved through our friendly local game stores, and they disappeared in 2 weeks. 2 weeks out of my warehouse and then 2 weeks to sell through. And retailers told me that even though they only had it on shelf for 2, maybe 3 weeks, it was one of their top-selling titles of the year. So I immediately hit reprint. They got in March finally, and I was like, well, how many should I make? And people are like, well, it's not holiday anymore. Pump the brakes a little bit. It's like, all right, so I'll do another 12. I did 12. They got here in March. They were gone in 1 week.
Oof.
So now I've got 18,000 on press with 18,000 of the new spooky Boop, the Halloween version.
Boop.
Yep.
Ooh.
So they're doing August and September respectively, and it's crazy. I have retailers who are ordering, who would order like 2 or 3 copies of something from me, right? I mean, that's the typical. I'm getting orders for 120, 240, like insane numbers.
So what do you think is the
3
catalyst
times
here? Is it the cats?
So it's lightning in a bottle, right? Here, I think when this game was first pitched to me by Scott, it was a game called Gekatai. It was.
You should have went with that name.
Yep. Yep. It was a Japanese themed black and white stones on a square grid. And at that time, it didn't even have like kind of the graduating pieces. So he pitched, and I was like, it's cool, but one, I think it needs kind of a mid game. So see if you can do something about that. But then on top of that, I'm not sure how I'd market it, because right now visually, it's not even quite as impactful as Shobu. So it would have to at least do that. Well, he came back I think 6-8 months later. He's like, by the way, whole new game mechanic in here, and really fixes that mid game. It's like, oh, let's check. So I played it, and it was great. I loved the game, but I was like, I still have a problem with the marketing. And he's like, but what if it was cats on a bed?
You just had that ready to go?
He did. He had a sample right there. So I was like, oh well, that's magnificent. So I can absolutely sell that. At that time, it was called Bounce House. Oh no, I'm sorry, Pounce House.
Yep.
And and I thought that was a pretty solid title. So we decided to move forward with it, and but then like I brought it to my team members, and they're like, cats. Ugh, I hate cat games. And a number of my team had that reaction. It's like, well, it could be anything. It could be dragons, it could be robots, it could be whatever. So at Gen Con one night, I did 3 covers, and I said, here are 3 different ways it could go, and so we decided on the cats, and I decided, I kind of needs a different name though. So I just added somewhere. I just boop, and because you boop the snoot, right? And so I thought that would be adorable and kind of meme-ish. And I think between the name, the art style, this is one of the few games I actually illustrate myself, and the really compelling gameplay, the fact that I decided, like, his original prototype, it was a bed with these great little pieces that looked like cats on there, and I was like, I want to preserve that. So we found a way to do like the printing on both sides for the cats, and then I had the idea of like creating the cloth comforter as the game board. So all of those things together is what makes the game what it is. You take any of those things out, it's probably not as special. And what's really interesting about the game is it is, I mean, as the Mensa Select Award, has shown, it's a smart game, right? It's very clever to play, but it's also a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's bringing in people who would never sit down to play an abstract like this, and it's getting them to try it and enjoy it. So it's weird. I talked to some retailers who are like, all right, well, why do you think this game is so hard to keep in stock? He's like, because we can sell it to anyone who walks in. If you're a couple, check. If you like abstracts, check. If you like cuteness, check. You like cats, good. Whatever it is, they can find someone a reason to get it. So
also, kids are willing to sit down in front of it because of the cuteness of the pieces.
Yeah.
And it's far more attractive than all those pointy pieces of chess.
And it's got a reward system built in. Even if you don't win the game, you're graduating those pieces into the adult cats. So as you play, there's these built-in incentives that gives you enjoyment and satisfaction. So
excellent.
So we already alluded to this a little bit earlier when we were talking about the spill. So the spill is there's no real laughter in this one. You mentioned smirk and laughter. This is a headier theme. Although, I mean, it's not like the game is overwhelming, right? I mean, it's a game you can play and has some neat mechanisms.
Game, yeah.
But what made you decide to go in this direction with this one? Because it is a little different than other stuff you've done.
Sure. What I'll say about my entire line, coming right out of Smirk and Dagger, is that I love games with an emotional center. So anything that challenges you mentally in terms of gameplay, but also like involves you in the world and makes you feel something at the table, that's a game I get excited about. So I saw Andy Kim's design at Proto-TO in Toronto. One, I got pulled in by the dice, the 4-way dice tower. That I thought was just really, really interesting, and that was his impetus for designing it. He'd never seen a 4-way dice tower in a game before, and he's like, "It's cool." First challenge was, "Can I create one?" Which he did in cardboard, and then he said, "Well, now what can I do with it?" And it was his wife who actually said, "Well, it's kind of like an oil coming out of a rig, and he's like, "Oh, great!" And so that was the game that they built. Now, when I went up and tried it, I just thought it was gripping. Like, one, it's the toy quality of dropping the dice is compelling. It's noisy. It brings the people to the table. But when you sit and play it, you get really concerned about the sea life. You get sucked up into the theme of it, and it makes you feel the tension. and you can see the tension physically develop. The danger on the board is apparent. You're like, oh, we have to go over there right now, or we're going to lose that animal. And so for that reason, it kind of gave me like a pandemic feel, but a little bit more approachable because you see everything develop, and it's very intuitive in nature. And I was shocked when the Origins Award put it up for Gamer of the Year. So I think shocked because it's kind of a sleeper. People when they first hear about the theme, they're like, well, man, oil spill and saving sea life, is that going to be fun? They get swept up in the in the theme a little bit before they even open the box.
Right.
But I mean, it is fun. It is a challenge, and it does its content so well that the companies that have formed after the Gulf disaster to mitigate those actual real life problems, they saw the Kickstarter, they supported it, and they're like, listen, I know what you're doing is it's supposed to be fun and engaging, it's abstracted, but you are doing such a great job of showcasing what it is we're up against when we're, battling one of these wells. We want to bring your game in as an icebreaker for people who join our company to understand what it is we do. And I was like, that is amazing. So, yeah, it's been very gratifying.
Very cool. I think I told you, Curt, when I saw you at a convention last, we played the spill on the Dice Tower cruise. When the ship was rotating, it was rolling, and so it became a dexterity game. Because you were waiting, if you wanted the dice to go that way, you had to make sure
funny.
All right, listen, first of all, for those of you watching / listening, that does not happen hardly ever on the cruise. Eric is making this cruise sound like we were rough at sea here. Come on, Eric.
There was some slight movement, and it was just enough. We were still timing it. You put a bunch of gamers in a room that moves slightly left to right. They're going to wait. I didn't say it was a lot. Anyway.
That's funny.
We're trying to sell tickets, Eric. Doesn't like, the room was spinning in circles. And
it's a lovely trip. I want to get to Drew alluded to you taking the company full time, and wanted to know if there were any surprises when you decided I'm going to become a full-time board game producer. Was there anything that surprised you about that was not there when you were doing this as a hobby?
So the only thing that was a major surprise was that because I had only been working on Smirk and Dagger from like 9 to midnight when I had a full-time career, I figured when I went full-time, I would have ample time to do everything.
Sure.
And what I really discovered was that I am busier now than I have ever been in my entire life, and I am not someone who just sits on my laurels. So, but in this 6 years since I went full-time, and because I'm now supporting my family doing this, I have been more choiceful in titles. I have been working harder at marketing. I've been working harder at all aspects of what I do to make sure these games are as amazing as they can be, that they pop in the marketplace. And so I'm finding that the most surprising thing is I have less time than I ever had when I had a full-time job. And I thought I'd have a little bit more breathing room.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure anything is like that, any enterprise, when you get involved that much.
Yeah.
But congratulations on the success of Boop. It's been nominated for a lot of awards. In fact, it was nominated for a Dice Tower Award.
Yes,
and so we'll see what's going on there. But I think it's time for us to talk about games in general, about games that we played. So, Curt, what's a game that you played lately and you thought was good? Actually, you might have thought it was bad. I don't know.
Oh, no. So I played 2 that I really enjoyed. I played Splendor Duel, which I had not heard was coming out. I think I just happened to see it when I was on one of my convention trips, and I stopped by a retailer, and I was like, oh, well, what's this? And so we brought it back to the hotel that night, and I played it with one of my guys, and we were like, oh my God. Like, I mean, Splendor, I I enjoy Splendor. I play that with my family, but I really thought they added a lot to the game to make it more interesting for 2 players. Just I thought some really innovative mechanics in how how it kind of spirals around in terms of what pieces you're going to get, and when the turn ends, and therefore what strategy you employ on what pieces you take now. So I thought it was very clever.
Yeah, I played this this past weekend as well, and it's a lovely little twist on the system. I like that positional aspect of what you're taking. Yeah.
And I think that it's more than just a twist, Eric. I think it's like two Splendor what Seven Wonders Duel is to Seven Wonders, almost.
Agreed.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a significant mechanical change that adds a whole new level of strategy.
It's a lot about what you're leaving for your opponent, which is the case with Seven Wonders Duel as well.
Yeah.
And not just what you need, but what your opponent could, because there's only one other person across the table from you, and you can see the board situation. You can be a little more careful about what am I leaving for you to do, and how does that restrict your options. Yeah.
Well, you
all right. So I played a game called Valbara, which has 2 A's in it. Actually, 3 A's. Vaalbara. This is a quick card drafting game. You've got a deck. Everybody has their own deck of cards, and they have numbers 1 through 10. And each of the numbers have a specific power, and you're blind bidding. Everybody puts down a card, and they all flip them up, and you will be drafting cards into your little tableau based on the order in which you've played the cards. The lowest number goes first. But the higher numbers have more powerful abilities where you can swap things around in the card display and all this stuff. And it's got those variable scoring techniques based on what suit it is that you're drafting, all of those sort of rules. I found it enjoyable, but not great as a 2-player game. It lacked, I think you have like a front row and a back row, and you can only draft from the front row, but you can see what's coming up. So you might be able to manipulate cards or know that you're going to want to keep a particular card for turn order. And with a 2-player game, it's only 4 cards that you can see. There aren't enough options for you to have a full spectrum of options open to you, choices. And I think it's much better with more people. So I was a little cold on it on a 2-player game, but I want to try it with more people. That's Valbara, Vaalbara.
This game is great. I like it a lot. And Eric, well, I haven't played it with 2, but I wouldn't play it with 2. I would play it with 5. Eric, I was suspicious, not suspicious, I assumed that when you played it with 5, you would consider this to be I'm saying the word, not you, a Citadel's killer.
Well, I would love for something to kill Citadels, so I guess I'm okay with that.
How rude, but all right.
I will try it with 5.
All right, I got a game here called The Finest Fish, where you are trying... Game. You'd think so. It's from a company called Last Night Games. They did a prior game called Life of a Chameleon. And The Finest Fish, you have this big giant, your board is a koi, goldfish, and you put these little scales on it, and you build it out. It looks fantastic. And it's a really simple game. You pull out groups of 3 scales equal to the number of players, and players take turns drafting those, and then you put them together on your fish, or you trade them in for other scales, or you trade them in for gold cards. And so a gold card will show different patterns you're trying to make on your fish. And you get 3 points for each gold card that you do, but you also might just want to put big groups of scales together. And then black scales are the most valuable. I guess black goldfish are the most sought after. I know that if I see a black goldfish, I think it looks pretty cool. So it's interesting because it's a very, very light game. I mean, you're just drafting and putting stuff on. But as you put the scales on and you're trying to meet, your typical scoring stuff, it looks pretty good. There's some satisfaction of building this goldfish out. I was very impressed with this one. This is the kind of game that I would love to see sold at, big box stores everywhere, because it's so easy to play, so easy to jump into. Anyone can play it, even Grandpa. I'm gonna start saying that now. I am a grandfather. I can just start saying all kinds of grandpa stuff, right?
Indeed. What else did you get to the table there, Curt?
Oh, well, this is a little bit older now, but Clank Catacombs. I'm actually a big fan of the Clank series. Little bit less so on the space, but I think what Catacombs does differently is that they've got this modular board system now. So as you're drafting your cards and exploring the dungeon, trying to get all your treasures, you are actually building the board as you go. And you may not know where the treasures are, and you're kind of waiting for them to show up in some cases. What I think Space tried to do, and what this does extremely well, is it kills the strategy of racing into the caverns, getting the first cheap thing, and getting out and shutting down the game.
Yes.
I think the challenge of the new version is, can you survive? And I actually love that as a tension. So it's fun to explore. It takes a little bit longer to play, maybe, but it's something that I think is terrific. And a really nice build for it.
It's a really solid new version. I really like it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's my de facto way to play now because it's just fun to do that exploring. I like that a lot. I also think it would be pretty easy for them to expand it. You stick some new tiles in, and just that option of exploring. I still am waiting for the day we have true exploration in a game. I'm going to say this once every 3 or 4 months, so some company will do this. I want a virtual deck of cards on an app that
He's taking notes.
that the company consistently updates, but they don't tell you, right? So, I mean, well, you'll update your app, right? But you're playing through the game, it'll say flip a card, and you flip a card, you're like, oh my word, I've never seen this card before.
New.
That's cool.
No one has done this yet. It would be great. I would be so excited about a game like that. And you wouldn't have to keep buying stuff. There would just be this deck of cards, and you've seen most of the cards. No, I'm not asking for microtransactions here. I'm saying you buy the game once, and the company has to put a little bit of effort into putting new cards in the mix, or even not necessarily new cards in the mix, but they start with a base of 500 cards, and only 50 of them, when you play a game, get shuffled into that deck. So you just might discover something you've never seen before. I just think that would be cool.
Okay. Well, for now, you can go with my next selection, which is also a deck building game, the Marvel Legendary deck building game, specifically the Infinity Saga. So if you want more stuff, you can keep buying the little expansion packs for Legendary.
Yeah, but you know what's in that.
You do. But sometimes the interactions can be interesting, which is what I wanted to talk about. So the Infinity
Wait, is this
Saga,
the MCU one, Eric?
This is the MCU one that.
Oh, I can't even listen to this. Oh, it looks so terrible.
So the one that there's a scheme that is in this box that is WandaVision. And it turns the board into the different decades, and you start out with because in the WandaVision series, you start out with a very limited color palette. You're just in the 50s, and as the scheme twist cards come out, the board starts to expand. So the city's only 3 spaces wide at the beginning, and it fills up real fast, and you can't defeat the people fast enough. But then it grows, and then it starts destroying itself. And you have to win the game before all of television is destroyed.
That's kind of neat.
I found it. What I love about the Legendary system is that they can do stuff like that. You can do weird twists with the system, with the mechanisms, and just make it work. And you roll with the punches in this shrinking and growing city space. So that's hidden in the Legendary Infinity Saga for Marvel.
I can't get over the movie stills. They look so terrible.
Yeah, and they have huge icons in the center because probably for rights management, they have to say what movie each still came from. So just gigantic logo, the Avengers Infinity War, just right there in the middle of the card.
I straight up, I got it out, and I was like, I don't care how good the cards are. I'm not playing this.
I wanted to play WandaVision, that's all.
No, not good enough for me. All right. What did I pick? Wild Tile West, which is the newest game from Direwolf. Hey,
Oh.
that's a crossover. We were just talking about them with Clank. So Wild Tile West is a new tile placement game where there's a big board. It's a triple layer board with a bunch of tiles in it. You roll dice, and then you put those dice on their different spots on the board, and those show you which tiles you can draft that turn. And then you draft a tile, you put it on your board. You're trying to put little all sorts of things. Herds of cows will get you points. Different buildings you can build in your town will give you different points. One of the things I like in this game is you collect these little bullet tokens. They're little gray bullets. And whenever you get a sheriff, if you put the sheriff in the same row as an outlaw, you shoot that outlaw, and then you put the bullet on the outlaw and rotate it. It now becomes a gravestone, which is a really dumb little thing, but I like it so much. Of course, they're all little animals because that's how the West was won, with bears and cowboy hats. Are they riding horses? Because I'm always confused by this part.
Bears riding horses?
Yeah, I just think that the horse couldn't hold the bear. But maybe I put too much thought into this.
I'm just saying.
Good night, everybody.
I think we got to end there. It's so dumb. I opened that door. I did.
Oh, man. Curt, this has been a blast. If people want to find out what Smirk and Dagger is
you took me seriously.
Personally, yes. Where do they go?
Wild Tile West is a great game. I wanted to say that. Okay, Curt, go ahead.
You can head to smirkanddagger.com. You can email us at smirkanddagger@gmail and everywhere else on the interwebs.
Perfect.
That's right, because Smirk and Laughter is going. When is that happening? You said they were combining. Is that now? Has it already happened?
Yeah, if you go to smirkanddagger.com right now, it's actually a blended site. So if you search for Smirk and Laughter, you'll still find it because I'm going to still support it for another year or so. But when you see new titles come out, they're all going to be Smirk and Dagger.
Did you get stickers to put on the Smirk and Laughter games?
Nope.
No. Okay.
No need.
What about Board Game Geek? Are you going to go in there and have them fix that?
We may. Yeah.
I'm sure that's an easy fix.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, it'd be like a new edition. There'll be the Smirk and Dagger version of Boop.
Yeah.
The cats are like, "Wow!" Alrighty, folks. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Curt, for coming on. And wow, that hour went by quickly, folks. We will see you in the future. Until next time, though, I'm Tom Vassell.
And I'm Eric Summerer.
And we'll see you soon at the table.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you in 2 weeks when our guest will be Van Ryder Games' Julie Ahern. At the Table is produced by Tom and me with assistance from Roy Kennedy, Wendy Yee, and Chris Yee. The greatest elevated areas of all time, brought to you by Mountain Goats. Our theme is written by Timothy Pinkham, arranged by Dave Culling, and support for everything at the Dice Tower comes from viewers and listeners like you. Reach out to us on Facebook or Twitter, or to Tom at Dicetower.com or Eric at Dicetower.com. Until we see you again from all of us at the table, have fun
gaming.